So my thesis project is, I guess kind of as a bit of background to this, like, it started with a problem statement and more or less a problem in my current job title. I work for New York State as a graphics and web developer, but I'm also a technical trainer for New York State. In particular, we deliver training on Office 365 and Microsoft SharePoint. And one of the difficulties that we have is we have restrictions on travel for our particular agency. I work for the Office of Information Technology. And basically what we do is we provide technology-based services to other New York State agencies like Department of Environmental Conservation, Department of Motor Vehicles, Office of Child and Family Services. And because of restrictions on our ability to travel, we're not able to deliver training to other areas of New York State, such as Western New York or into New York City area or even the Southern Tier. So we're kind of stuck with just the Albany area of New York State. What we've been doing is delivering training in person, which has been highly successful for creating a level of competency with Microsoft SharePoint that's sort of helped boost productivity in other agencies and other areas of New York State. Word traveled, I guess, and we started getting several requests for us to come out to Western New York as well as New York City. But because of those restrictions on our travel, we had to decline and kind of left a good portion of New York State government employees without the needed training. So to fill that void, what I have started to do here is build out an online training curriculum for, in particular for my thesis for SharePoint, a new user training for the platform to establish the basics for whether it's a longtime employee with the state who has recently been told that they're switching over to SharePoint for their intranet services or their support services as a platform, or the new employee coming in who may or may not have any sort of experience with Office 365 or SharePoint. So developing this curriculum and building it in a way where, while I'm focusing specifically on the SharePoint end of things, I'm setting this up so that way further down the road, should we choose to do so, we can offer other training on some of Office 365's functionality and products like dedicated Microsoft Word, Excel, Access training, things of that nature. So what I've been mostly working with is my audience is very diverse. We've got a lot of longtime state employees that are very resistant to change. And we've got a good influx of newer employees who specialize in their respective fields but don't have a level of technical proficiency to just come in and pick something like this up and run with it. So they're in need of basically some quick crash course education on SharePoint as a platform. A lot of offices will use it for building standalone apps, or even just something as simple as organizing their documentation in a document library. And unfamiliarity with the platform can be kind of a relatively large hindrance because of some of the quirks, and also because of the fact that every site is built differently. So one of my challenges was to create this curriculum so that way it covered a lot of the basics, but also sort of generalized the experience of working with SharePoint for both longtime state employees as well as new and incoming state employees. So what I've been recently started doing was I stopped with my writing process and came in, created a site collection and started developing the actual training site itself within SharePoint. I outlined my curriculum for the class into 3 distinct sections, one that sort of introduces our users to SharePoint, its functionality and what it can do. The second section deals with a little more interaction on their part, working with lists and exercises so that they actually start going in and working with the platform. And then the third section to sort of summarize what the document library does and how that works in relation to collaboration on their part with coworkers, and some of the features of the document library, such as version history, tracking changes, and other aspects of, similar to that. And one of the things that I didn't want to lose in this process was the hands-on, the kinesthetic aspect of this class in translating it from the in-person training to the online training. I really wanted to retain that hands-on interaction on the part of the learner. So what I'm working on right now is the general flow of the class, making sure that I'm covering all of my bases by using a mixed media of both written instruction and information mixed with videos as well, covering some of more of the technical demos, demonstrating certain features and different actions that can be taken within the platform when working with either the lists or the libraries. I did a lot of looking around with some other learning platforms like lynda.com, the Interaction Design Foundations platform as well. I'm used to Blackboard and Moodle from my previous experience teaching with SUNY as well. And one of the things that I noticed from some of these other online platforms, in particular stuff like lynda.com and IDF, was that it tended to sway heavily to one direction of delivering the information. Lynda.com is great, but all of its content is delivered strictly via video. There's really not a whole lot done to accommodate the broader spectrum of learners, whether it's someone who learns from reading, someone who learns from watching and seeing, or someone that learns from doing. And in my experience with delivering the in-person training for this class is a lot of these individuals that this is going to be targeted to really are that mixed bag. They need a lot of bases covered in terms of the way that this content is presented to them, and also the role that they take as a learner. The greatest benefit that I've seen is when they're active participants in the process of the class. And then other stuff like IDF, it was in going through that, and I actually took a class through there. It was a lot of reading, a lot of text information, multiple choice questions, not a whole lot of active engagement on the part of the learner, asking of them, how does this apply to your particular work environment, or how might you apply this to your specific case. And you can see here what I've started to do is come through and outline everything. I've been kind of busy with other stuff recently, but I've gotten in here and started to actually do a bit of web design within the platform itself, outlining things and actually starting to come through and drop in some of the exercise content that I'll need for later on once I've sort of written up all the necessary text information. I'm also going through and teaching myself a bit of video editing and videography, which I'll need to produce some of the videos as well. I have some screen capture software that I've used in the past, but haven't been quite happy with. So I'm looking at using, looking at procuring some better software through my office, so that way I can come through and record some interactive demos to get just a little better quality in terms of both the video content and the audio as well. And that is pretty much where I'm at right now.
Ross, you want to jump in? You got the mute on.
Yeah, that always creates some difficulties. Yeah, I was wondering, you mentioned mixed media. What areas? I mean, you talked about video. Are there any sort of interactive tools you wanted to use in particular?
Yep, I'm actually looking at seeing what I can do within SharePoint itself. I want to delivering the learning and different exercises to students. We've been sort of restricted to just help documentation in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Both written information, video, quizzing aspects of it at the end of these sections as well. In terms of interactive stuff, a lot of that's going to come from the exercises, which I'm calling assignments. So asking the user after viewing a specific section or reading a specific section on, for example, working with lists, to go into the contact list and add themselves, then go in and edit and add a photo, or interact with a specific feature or functionality of the site. And one of the great things about SharePoint is users will be logging in under their own work IDs. So we'll be able to go through as instructors afterwards and see who has done what, and specifically the actions that they took within the page, to make sure that they're interacting with it as we've requested they do, and also to provide feedback later on.
Are they? So they're going to be taking a course in this that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, or
yes, yep,
okay.
Yep. It's going to be self-paced too. The training we deliver in person takes place over roughly 4.5 to 5 hours. So one of the requirements for this was that it would have the same duration of time that the employee would have to dedicate to it. And because it's an online class, what we're aiming to keep it as is 5 hours worth of investment in the employee's time, and giving them a full work week in which to complete that. So if they wanted to, they could sit down and complete this, over the course of 1 or 2 days, or they could devote an hour a day and get it done in a week.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't you doing it synchronously?
Probably because of the availability of the employees. We've had a hard time getting everybody, like entire offices together one at a time in one location. And we've also got a large discrepancy in quality of connectivity across New York State and some of our offices. So we've kind of decided to do it as a self-paced. They will be like all in the same location in the same site. So users will go and sign up, and we'll put anywhere from 25 to 30 into a class, and they'll be able to interact via the actions in the process of completing their, also through discussion boards.
Wait a minute. Now I'm totally confused. What do you mean you'll put them in a class?
So the way this is built out is the site that I'm building now acts as a template. We have a statewide learning and talent management software where New York State employees, when they wish to sign up for training, they go in, they sign up, and it adds them to a wait list. What we can do is from that wait list, take 30 of those employees and provision them with access to this site. They'll then be considered from that point on a single classroom, so a class of 30 students.
So how do the discussion boards work?
Yeah. But just before we get there, you can spin off on-demand clusters of 30 students. As soon as you hit 30, you spin one off. As soon as you hit 30.
Yes, as soon as we have 30 students, what will happen is an instructor will come into this site collection, create a new subsite, and use the template for this site as a means of creating an entirely new instance of the class.
So in this case, yeah, okay. And then Russ's question was about the discussion, right?
Discussion,
yeah, I was just wondering how that gets set up. Is it per class? And could you run something synchronously, or just, it doesn't have to be synchronous with a lot of students, but just with some, or you'd rather not do that, just so you get an interactivity?
It can be, yeah, it can be synchronous with some. It depends on the student's availability. One of the things that I'm looking at right now is having a time during the week, at least 1 hour, that's going to be sort of like an office hour.
Right.
I'll be able to interact with students. They can come in, ask questions. I can take them through any of the features and functionality live right there via, we have Cisco WebEx as a statewide platform that we use to hold video conference calls and things like that.
Uh-huh.
It could be semi-synchronous with some of the class.
Right.
Yeah, I know that's what we've learned works pretty well in terms
Yeah.
of getting some input from the students,
Yep.
not being sort of separated. But I do like the office hours too. What are their motivations? What gets them to show up for these classes and to do well or whatever?
A lot of the motivation of late has been a push by New York State to get rid of a lot of the antiquated technology that has been around for several years at this point. One of them is attached drive space that employees have used to store and organize files for their respective agencies or offices. What they're doing is they're consolidating all of these and slowly deprecating them. So employees have been asked to, over the next 2 years, migrate their content over to SharePoint libraries.
Uh-huh. So
Use,
it's fear of being left behind, sort of, or not kind of.
yes, and also because
But you asked about the employees' motivations, right? Or else the people taking the
Right.
course.
Yeah. Do they get grades,
Yeah.
or I don't know what is it
Survival.
that gets them to show up? I guess.
yeah, it's partly survival. Also, what we've been doing is the team that I work on, we're sort of the dedicated application development team for New York State. And for instance, one of the projects that we just had was human resources came to us with a need to streamline their fingerprinting process. And what we ended up building for them was within SharePoint this network of forms and workflows that streamlined their paper process and eliminated, I think it was something like 93% of the paper from the new
Oh.
screening, fingerprinting, and background process check.
So what are the things that are interesting about SharePoint from your perspective?
From my perspective, just its versatility. I mean, whether you're using it to do something like this here, if you imagined this as a document library of hundreds or even thousands of documents, from agendas, field reports, whatever it might be, the ability to use metadata to come through and find the documentation that you need quickly based on metadata, whether it's the inbuilt metadata such as, oh, this is a Word doc or an Excel document or a JavaScript file. Being able to add your own metadata along with that makes it a lot quicker. One of the other interesting things that I in particular have found of interest is previously they didn't have anyone that was geared towards visual design. So one of the roles that I have taken is to come in and help with the usability of SharePoint as a platform and also visual design aspects. They also really didn't have anyone to do a lot of the training that we've been doing for the last 9 months. We'd originally set a goal of 500 employees to be trained before the end of the year. We started March 20th and we're now at 643, something like that.
So you've done these trainings, and these are mostly in-person trainings, and now your job is to convert all of that experience, knowledge, understanding of how people respond to all these things, the 60 people this year and last year, and now to somehow pour all of that into an online, asynchronous, maybe discussion board, hour-a-week conversation.
Yes.
So that's an interesting thesis from like a conversational perspective,
Can I throw something in? I can't see in a million years doing this much work for this thesis. I would create, and I'm not going to be sitting there reading 5 hours worth of materials. Don't take that personally.
No,
but,
I understand that.
But what you really might want to consider is sort of a pilot, and we've had a lot of students do this. So mock-ups, how do you want this laid out? What's going to make this interesting? In other words, define it. It would almost be like a request for a proposal. You're sort of
building this. Ken is building this, right? I mean, this is happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can definitely build it. And
the train is running, and I think we have to help Ken figure out a way to observe the train as it's going down the tracks and take his observations and call it a
and it's kind of one of those things too. Whether I like it or not, it's the train is running and the throttle is stuck. This was something it's been requested for quite a while, and also in terms of the time and physical commitment from myself and also the other trainers that work for me. This is kind of the thing that we do on the side of our actual jobs. Something that allows us to reach more, but also reduce our own time commitment as well.
Yeah, well, talking about time commitments, but the idea might be to look at what's going to be new and exciting about this. We sort of talked about this with Lindsay. The interactive classroom. I mean, this is just, first of all, from an information design perspective. Once you've done it once, as far as I'm concerned, you've accomplished your goal, at least for a thesis. I'm not so concerned about what you have to do for your job. That's great. I think that's great. But I just want to think of a way we can make this doable. I've always talked about this doability factor, and I don't want to, I'm sure we can't sit around reading, 5 hours worth of work or even observing it, but you could say, okay, what are 5 aspects of this that are taking things in new directions, in interesting ways? And maybe this is pure SharePoint. It's just what SharePoint's going to let you do that, a written manual wouldn't let you do. That's great. And I'd be happy because I'd like to see that. I'm not that familiar with this. So, but what you need to do is sort of pull out enough that you can apply theory in a way that, exposes some interesting, neat aspects of this software.
You could treat SharePoint as the innovation and do an innovation analysis. Like, so what is innovative about SharePoint? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That matters for me in my particular work situation right now. And I think that, and so those are like mini case studies, 3 is going to be enough, 7's too many, I sense 5. Sort of like that, say, okay, and then you'll figure out what those are going to be as they show up. And eventually it's like, oh, there it is. You don't know what they are yet, but they will come. And you might begin to think about them and begin to think, what could they be? But that might work, because it's really, you have to figure out a way to observe this process in a dispassionate way as a scholar, or as an ethnographer, as an observer, as a chronicler of some sort.
One thing to consider is there's something called Malone's motivation theory, and it looks at what motivates people. It gets back to that question of, why are people taking the class? But it may not, they may have to take it or whatever, and that may be very basic. But also, once they're there, what's the challenge? Why do they get interested? Are they going to get overwhelmed? Are they going to get nervous and get scared and run away? Are they, there's challenge, there's curiosity, there's control, which is generally that they have active control of what they're doing and feel like they can have an impact, sort of do something with it. And so those are some of the basic, motivation. There's intrinsic versus extrinsic, but the extrinsic is you'll get a grade. That one may not be that complicated, but the intrinsic says, what makes you interested? And these are older people, right? Is that right? They're not, 18-year-olds, whatever. Is that right? So you've got what's called an androgynous population. They are motivated by much more things that interest them. Is this interesting? Boy, that's neat. I got to do that. Oh yeah, I can create these files. And so it's got to give them something back, some value added. That's really common it's with you guys too, at grad students. It's sort of like, you're not just there for a grade. You're there because something drew you into this program and something makes you interested. So I would really look at what are those motivations and how are you matching that with what SharePoint can give them.
So that's a somewhat different kind of study. That would be a study from the perspective of the users of the system. And I think that would be pretty cool. So you could develop a whole set of ideas and concepts from literature and then take screen grabs of your SharePoint installation where you address those questions. They don't have to be screen grabs. They can be little short, 30-second videos. Oh yeah, this was a concern of ours and this is what we did. And so you can take some scholarly literature and do an annotation of it and create some video annotations of it. You could probably put the whole thing in SharePoint.
Yeah.
So you can also begin to think about like ways that you can document your something, and it's any one of these ideas, but again, any one, not many. Because I really appreciated the big broad description of what you're doing. So that's good, but I'm left with, so what are you studying? What are you asking about?
Okay.
And that's, I'm left with that without understanding the answer to that question.
Yeah, and that gets back to that you see your role, as I understand it, in part as an information designer. Okay, so you have to decide, what does that mean? It's not just, a cute typeface or an interesting set of colors. There's something that you can learn from the users or from your own studies that you can apply in this way. And that's really what makes it an information design and technology, thesis projects. So, you've got lots of opportunities there, but what you want to do is draw out just some component of this, and then you can show me examples of that, oh, the discussion board is a way that we answer their critical questions and that we have a better understanding of what motivates them and that sort of thing. Oh, we give them a little help. Do you guys have like a help desk or something? I don't know, just something where people can call if they have some issue or something.
Yeah, we do. Yep.
And another, I don't know if I'm not looking for more work, but sometimes it's nice to have a framework. You might look at any of the frameworks that exist for evaluating online courses. Quality Matters, there's whole sets of rubrics, and you can run once you've done it, you can run your course through that rubric, and your thesis can be a response in a sense to that. That would give you a framework. You could say, well, this is what they thought, and I understand what this means. This is coming from this part of the literature, but we did it this way because of this, and it could be you could engage. It could give you something to bounce off of, to engage with, because that's sometimes hard to find in this setting. What are you asking? What questions are you asking? And it can't be like we did this and here's my course kind of thing. There needs to be I think your design talked about, or your topic statement said social constructivism.
Yeah.
Well, that's then your literature of social constructivism and your questions are about that. But so we need to see that. I think I'd want to see like that's a set of questions. I'm not sure how you apply that exactly, but
okay.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because if you're going to use a theory and you're going to state it right in your title, you really want to define it carefully, and that can very well.
In your proposal.
What?
In the proposal.
That can really clarify what you're after. In other words, creating this is nice, but it's the result of some sort of thought process, and that's what I would be interested in. I mean, you really want to, just seeing whatever 100 pages, that should be based on something. And I really like the idea of maybe a Zoom sessions or discussions where you can respond to the discussion boards. Maybe people help each other, because that's always hard. It sounds like you've got a lot of potential users.
Yeah.
You want to create some internal discussion boards, especially because each group may be different in some way, fundamental way, in terms of how they're using them. So it'd be nice to have a discussion board with people who know what they're doing with it,
So you can use the literature to either inspire you to do things,
right,
or to help you reflect on the things that you've done.
Okay.
So if you want to search for inspirational ideas, that's a whole other different category, right? Then you start that. You're not going to find that. You'll find that by scouring. I don't think you have time for that. No. I like you guys are. That's not like no. We're New York State. We're not. Yeah, we're doing it. I get it. It's an interesting thing. So all of those constraints, what I think is really another interesting angle on this, and we've given you a bunch, and you should choose one, right? An interesting angle on this is the bureaucratic kind of management of information resources. You had it really well defined in terms of provisioning, and you can provision, and you understand large-scale management of information technology at a designer perspective, and that's unusual. That meeting of those two sets of knowledge is really unusual. And if you could capitalize on that, like how does understanding design help you understand provisioning or something? I don't know exactly where I'm going with that, but if you could, that would also help you professionally, because it would cause you to question your particular niche right now from a critical perspective. And that's a lot of people. That's a big responsibility, that you're in a niche that's a growing market. And, I heard in your vocabulary of understanding of the administrative issues, it's this is what it is. It's like, it's going to be this.
And that's born out of like the need for this. I mean, I
Yeah,
mean,
but
600 some employees out of 140,000.
yeah, the fact that you understand it, you understand the scaling issues, you understand it, and you might end up supervising a large scale project. That's really cool. So you might want to think about how do you spend more time learning about that part of it as well as design. And I don't know exactly what that means. Like I really don't. It's something about administrative. It's like it's a do you remember interacting with Doug Cohen when he was a student and he taught some classes?
A
He was
little bit, yeah.
worked at he was one of the directors at Open SUNY, and he really understood systems and how they're deployed in large scale university environments, like what you're doing, and then how to push some design principles into those products. It was, that's a nice niche. So you
Yeah.
might play with that. And then finally, I went with one more idea, because there's a bunch, is that I don't understand exactly how SharePoint works, but does it run on like a template system? Are there a whole bunch of templates sitting back there somewhere that have all the CSS?
There's not. What it runs off of is it's a site collection. So you've got, your root site at the very top, and then subsites come down off it. You create a new site unless someone's built something for you and it's been templated out. You have just a very bland vanilla site, nothing there. And that's like part of building this out gives our different trainers a way of basically they've got a class of 30 people. They make a new site from the template. It's set, ready to go, clean, and they run with it from that. One of the things that I do with the state is I'm billed as the guy who makes SharePoint not look like SharePoint. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much my day job. Is I do a lot of the visual design and usability design stuff within the platform.
And when you do that work, what are the objects that you're creating? Are they template files? What are they called? Style files?
They're style sheets. One of the things that I do is I create new CSS styles.
Okay.
For the site, and I'll also create custom page layouts that drop right into SharePoint, and
okay.
Occasionally I'll build new master page files that form basically the base HTML for the sites.
So, and for the course that you're building it in SharePoint, or you're building it in Blackboard?
I'm building it in SharePoint.
Yeah, and that's going to have a set of CSS files, master page layouts, etc. That could also be your thesis. That's the creative design part of the course in Facebook. You could take that out, and that's your thesis. That's your artistic presentation. And then all the design decisions that go into making those documents, those are driven by design theory.
Right. So it's the why. In other words, why do I don't care so much about the little.
Yeah. So that's the way of questioning your work from a design perspective. It's all about, I know nothing about this stuff, but it's all about color, design theory, big, small, left, right, all those things. And then what you turn in effect, is just this series of SharePoint files that drive a site. And it's a deal. And then you could print some sample pages with my style sheets. That's what I was trying to get. So that's the artwork.
Yeah.
That would be yet another thing. So one of those things. And
they are connected. I mean, if you're dealing with style sheets, you're dealing with motivation. I mean, why would people look at it? You don't want it to just be pretty. You want it to
yeah, you want it to be useful, and
and you want it to accomplish your goals.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can I just ask you your platform? I guess we're not dealing with like mobile devices, or does that matter? I know this.
No, SharePoint is flexible. It will work and represent just fine on mobile devices, but our primary focus is going to be desktop machines.
Mm-hmm. So like iPads you're not too concerned about? Or?
Nope, not too concerned about iPads. It's mostly users at their workstations in their offices. So desks with their desktop machines.
Okay.
Could you at least humor me a little bit and say they're desktop displays?
Desktop displays.
Because we have no idea what they're right. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're basically at like the 14-inch, the 22-inch display.
Yeah. A lot of users have a
Full screen.
dual screen. Usually, it's more and more commonly it's virtual desktops. So small form factor DVI.
Okay. So I think you're fading out there. I think I've got a sense. I mean, do you have what I think would be really helpful as we move forward? Russ's idea. It's up to Russ, but just I think specify sort of a question would help me out. Like,
Okay.
which of the, how are you going to harness the train, and what question are you going to ask?
Okay.
Yeah, and what theory are you going to apply, or theories? And I don't know if you could write a little memo. I know Steve used to do that, and I always liked it.
You can just
in paper,
Yeah, just submit it into the Blackboard site. Just resubmit it as the topic statement.
Okay.
Yeah, that specifies like this is the problem area. This is the whatever. This is my observational method. This is my data. This is what I'm going to show, or do or something. And there's a whole bunch of those ideas. There's the business. There's the design piece. There's the and you pick the innovation. Here's 5 innovations that are interesting. Some sort of structured model that will allow you to know when you're done, instead of it's December, I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Steve's exactly right. You really want to define what you're going to do for us. Don't worry so much about what you're going to do for the state. I mean, obviously there's overlaps, but what's important is where are you going? What are you going to give us? And once you've gotten there, we can say you're done.
Okay.
So cool, excellent. All right.
All right.
Everybody, take care. Thank you. Anyone who's hanging around.